In April 2025, President Trump's announcement of a 90-day pause on newly imposed reciprocal tariffs impacted international trade. The measure excluded Canada and Mexico, leaving both nations subject to existing 25% tariffs on goods not compliant with the USMCA, affecting North American trade relations. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed frustration with U.S. policy decisions. This exclusion undermines the spirit of cooperation that the USMCA was designed to foster, Carney stated in Ottawa, signaling a shift in Canada's approach to U.S. relations. Canada launched a plan to reduce its economic dependence on the United States, including expedited defense spending and revised procurement strategy to minimize reliance on U.S. contractors. This mirrors diversification efforts seen in other nations facing economic pressures. Carney outlined plans to increase Canada's military presence in the Arctic and pledged to surpass NATO's 2% GDP defense spending threshold before the previous 2032 target, up from the current 1.4% allocation. A new federal agency will centralize procurement expertise and streamline defense acquisitions, prioritizing domestic sourcing in critical sectors including steel, aluminum, and rare earth minerals to enhance Canada's strategic autonomy. We're witnessing a fundamental reorganization of global power dynamics, Carney noted, as Canada actively pursues deeper defense and security partnerships with European allies. This diversification of military cooperation comes as geopolitical uncertainties reshape traditional alliances. These initiatives coincide with growing global instability, particularly evident in regions near NATO's borders. Canadian officials emphasize these measures represent both an immediate response and a long-term strategy for ensuring national security and economic sovereignty. In a dramatic shift reflecting growing tensions between longtime allies, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled defense reforms aimed at reducing dependency on the United States. Speaking in Montreal, Carney highlighted the strained relationship with the U.S. under Trump's administration as a catalyst for change. Our military has been both underfunded and overly reliant on the United States, Carney declared, noting how international security norms face challenges. The strategic priorities of the United States have shifted significantly. The defense policy proposal focuses on meeting NATO's 2% spending target while enhancing Canadian armed forces capabilities. Key elements include increased military compensation and investments in submarines, icebreakers, and fighter aircraft. Carney announced plans to reassess Canada's F-35 jet purchase agreement with Lockheed Martin, suggesting European alternatives. This aligns with efforts to diversify Canada's defense partnerships beyond U.S. markets. The policy shifts mirror growing anti-U.S. sentiment across Canadian society. The Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, CHEO, has implemented travel restrictions to the United States, citing geopolitical risks. CEO Vera Etches advised staff against U.S. travel, highlighting stability concerns. Alberta Investment Management Corporation, AIMCO, managing $180 billion in pension assets, has suspended non-essential U.S. business travel, including attendance at U.S.-based conferences and events. These responses reflect changes in Canadian public sentiment, where trust in U.S. stability has eroded. The situation mirrors patterns seen in relations between Russia and its former Western partner, where ties deteriorated amid tensions. Carney's strategy represents a proactive approach to building Canadian resilience through diversified international partnerships. The focus on European and Asian markets suggests a long-term vision for reducing U.S. dependence while strengthening Canada's defense industry. In a significant shift in North American relations, Canadian institutions are implementing stringent protocols for cross-border travel to the United States, reflecting growing tensions between the longtime allies. Major organizations, including hospitals and universities, are now advising their staff to take unprecedented precautions when traveling south of the border. The CEO of a major Canadian healthcare network has issued guidelines for staff traveling to the U.S., including requirements to log out of hospital applications, remove sensitive patient data from devices, and reset passwords after U.S. customs inspections. The University of Waterloo now offers clean laptops to faculty members traveling abroad, protecting Canadian research assets from U.S. scrutiny. Be aware that U.S. customs officers have the right to inspect electronic devices upon entering the U.S., warned a recent institutional memo. The advisory recommends using burner phones and data-free laptops for essential travel only. These measures coincide with Canadian government travel advisories, warning citizens about intensified scrutiny at U.S. border crossings, including potentially invasive electronic searches. The situation gained attention when French authorities reported that one of their scientists was denied U.S. entry, allegedly due to criticism of U.S. research policies. American officials countered that the individual possessed sensitive U.S. laboratory data. The impact is visible in travel patterns. Statistics Canada reports a significant decline in Canadian automobile trips to the U.S., their primary international destination. This drop reflects growing nationalist sentiment among Canadians, with many choosing to avoid U.S. travel. These changes mirror protocols being implemented by European institutions following increased border tensions, suggesting a broader shift in international relations with the United States. The situation represents a departure from the traditionally open relationship between Canada and the U.S., highlighting the evolving nature of international travel and data security in the current geopolitical landscape. In a striking development, Canadian travel to the United States plummeted by nearly 32% in March 2025 compared to the previous year. This marks the third consecutive monthly decline, following February's 23% decrease, indicating a significant shift in cross-border relations. Good morning, I'm David Thompson. If you're finding this information valuable, please consider hitting that like button and sharing your thoughts below. The sharp downturn in travel coincides with escalating political friction between the two nations. President Donald Trump's criticism of Canadian economic policies has triggered a widespread backlash north of the border, fueling nationalist sentiment and spawning informal boycotts of U.S. goods, services, and travel destinations. Notable figures, including Canadian-born actor Mike Myers, have vocally expressed their frustration with the deteriorating bilateral relationship. The situation has been further aggravated by U.S.-imposed tariffs on crucial Canadian exports, steel, aluminum, and vehicles, threatening thousands of Canadian jobs. The travel decline isn't limited to road trips. Air travel from the U.S. to Canada by Canadian residents dropped 13.5% in March year-over-year. Canadian travel to other international destinations increased by 9%, suggesting a deliberate shift away from U.S.-bound travel. Airlines are reassessing route networks as demand for U.S. travel softens. The Canadian government recently issued a travel advisory warning citizens about increased scrutiny at U.S. border crossings. The economic implications are substantial, with Canadians being the largest group of international tourists to the U.S., spending $20.5 billion in 2024 alone. A 10% reduction in Canadian tourism could result in 2 million fewer visits, a $2.1 billion spending decrease, and approximately 14,000 job losses across U.S. hospitality sectors. This is David Thompson, bringing you the latest developments in this evolving situation. Here's a 1875 character news story based on your content. In a significant shift of national security policy, Canada finds itself at a critical crossroads as global tensions rise and traditional alliances face unprecedented strain. Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration is confronting the stark reality of decades of military underinvestment, with mounting pressure to strengthen Canada's defensive capabilities. Recent developments have highlighted the urgency of this situation. President Trump's return to prominence has injected new uncertainty into North American defense relationships, with his administration implementing fresh tariffs and making provocative statements about Canada's military dependence. In one particularly controversial moment, Trump even suggested annexing Canada as the 51st state. The warning from Canada's 1994 defense review now seems prophetic. The nation must never rely on others for its territorial defense. This concern has gained renewed relevance as Arctic ice melts and nations like Russia and China increase their northern presence, exposing vulnerabilities in Canada's frontier defenses. Currently allocating only 1.37% of GDP to defense spending, Canada remains well below NATO's 2% target. Defense Minister Bill Blair has declared this gap absolutely achievable to close by 2027, though this would require an additional 10 to 13 billion Canadian dollars annually. Prime Minister Carney has set a more conservative deadline of 2030. In response to these challenges, Carney has already taken decisive action, conducting diplomatic missions to Paris and London to strengthen European defense ties. Additionally, his administration is reviewing the $19 billion contract for 88 Lockheed Martin F-35 jets, signaling a potential shift away from U.S. defense manufacturers. Experts emphasize that reaching NATO's spending target isn't merely about procurement. It requires comprehensive reinvestment in infrastructure and personnel. This represents a fundamental reimagining of Canada's defense posture, moving beyond the post-Cold War era of scaled-down ambitions and budget constraints. In a significant shift for North American defense dynamics, Canada's armed forces face severe operational challenges threatening military readiness. The Canadian military currently has a critical shortage of 7,000 troops, while its aging aircraft and naval fleets approach obsolescence. The government has implemented policy changes allowing permanent residents to enlist, departing from traditional requirements. However, major hurdles lie in procurement processes, which Defense Ministry officials describe as broken. The procurement crisis is highlighted by the lengthy fighter jet selection process, prompting reforms. Current proposals include expedited acquisition of drones, tanks, and missile defense systems. Former Vice Chief Mark Norman criticized focusing on expensive acquisitions while neglecting basic infrastructure needs. Despite strong ties with U.S. defense contractors for major purchases like F-35 fighters and P-8A Poseidon aircraft, Canada seeks to reduce American supplier dependence. Canadian companies like Bombardier, MDA Space, and Telesat are advancing in satellite surveillance and communications, with industry leaders advocating for increased domestic capabilities. Public support for military spending has grown, with a 2025 Nanos poll showing only 15% opposing increases, down from 26%. Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Pellos proposed a 3% military tax on purchases. These ambitions face fiscal constraints, with Canada managing a $48 billion Canadian dollar deficit. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre suggests redirecting foreign aid to military spending. The changing U.S. relationship has become a key driver of these changes. Prime Minister Carney emphasizes independent defense capabilities, acknowledging that protecting sovereignty may require standing firm against U.S. pressure. This reflects growing recognition that Canada must develop self-reliant defense capabilities in an uncertain geopolitical landscape. In a significant shift of national security strategy, Canada is asserting its military independence and redefining its role in global defense, marking a departure from its traditional reliance on U.S. support. The transformation comes amid increasing uncertainty in international relations. Recent initiatives highlight this pivot, including Operation Nunalivut, Canada's largest Arctic exercise in nearly 2 decades, and investments in radar systems to enhance northern surveillance. The North American Iron Dome missile shield project underscores Canada's strategic importance in airspace and surveillance. NORAD remains crucial to continental defense, but Canada signals its intention to play a more autonomous role in global security matters. This shift comes as assumptions about reliable U.S. support show signs of strain. Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration is modernizing the armed forces, including rebuilding the defense industrial base and investing in next-generation technologies. Focus areas include cybersecurity, space-based surveillance, and AI systems. The transformation extends into foreign policy. Canada is pursuing partnerships with Europe, the Indo-Pacific region, and the Global South to ensure economic resilience. This strategy responds to the unpredictable nature of U.S. foreign policy, marked by rising nationalism. While the United States remains Canada's largest trading partner and key military ally, the relationship is evolving. Canadian leadership acknowledges that alignment with Washington may conflict with national interests or security imperatives. The upcoming election campaign under Prime Minister Carney will feature defense and sovereignty issues prominently, marking the first time these topics have taken center stage in national politics. This signals the emergence of a new national doctrine focused on resilience and independence. Canada's strategic realignment reflects understanding that the global order is shifting toward multipolarity, where traditional alliances are tested and democratic institutions face challenges. Good evening. I'm James Robertson with tonight's key developments in North American affairs. In a significant shift of global power dynamics, Canada is positioning itself as a major player in international relations as tensions mount between traditional allies. Our analysis focuses on how these changes could reshape North America's economic and political landscape. Prime Minister Mark Carney's bold vision for Canada's role represents a departure from diplomatic tradition. As liberal democracies face challenges, Canada appears ready to step into a leadership vacuum, leveraging its position as a trusted diplomatic broker and emerging military power. Breaking news from Ottawa indicates strategic investments in defense are underway. Sources reveal Canada's military modernization program, valued at $65 billion, will reduce dependency on U.S. systems while strengthening NATO partnerships. The timing is noteworthy, as President Trump's 90-day tariff pause creates uncertainty in North American markets. While Canada and Mexico received exemptions, implications for continental trade remain unclear. Notable is the growing nationalist sentiment within Canada, with polls showing decreased cross-border travel and business with the United States. Canadian institutions now advise against non-essential travel south, citing increased scrutiny and risks. We may be witnessing a fundamental realignment in North American power dynamics. As one senior diplomat noted anonymously, the next few years will determine whether Canada remains reactive to global events or becomes a proactive architect of international stability. The economic implications are substantial. Markets are responding to Canada's assertive stance, with the Canadian dollar showing strength against major currencies. We want to hear your thoughts. How do you think these tensions will impact the U.S. economy? Share your views in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you found this report informative, please support our channel by liking and subscribing. Stay tuned for more analysis of North American affairs. This has been James Robertson with your evening news update. Another report awaits you on screen.